Hi, I'm Tyler. I'm an iOS developer at Livefront. And in this video, I'd like to explain a foundational concept called unidirectional data flow that we use at Livefront that influences the way that we think about building products. We'll start by taking a look at how an application comes into the world. Then we'll see how an app matures and identify the logical endpoint of an architecture that isn't designed around an app state. We'll wrap up by discussing what unidirectional data flow is and how to avoid common mistakes. Let's start by taking a look at how an app comes into the world. This is how the humble app begins. In Silicon Valley lore, there's a hacker genius who has a brilliant idea for an app. To grow the app, all you have to do is add more instances of the model view controller pattern. Let's take a look at a concrete example to get an idea of what this might look like in an app. This is the Overcast podcast player. There's a view controller here that displays a playlist of podcast episodes. Notice the time remaining and title of the episode are displayed in the cell. There's a play-pause button at the bottom of the screen, and another view controller is displayed in a sheet which contains information about the episode along with a play-pause state. Additionally, expanding the cell reveals a third play-pause button. Don't forget that audio can also be played and paused from the lock screen, the Apple Watch, or a pair of AirPods. Opportunities abound for the source of truth to be changed out from under your view controller. In a typical application, this would be 3 view controllers and the state would likely be duplicated 3 times. You can see how keeping state in sync could start to feel like herding cats as additional view controllers and states are added. And the thing is, this isn't an app. This is a feature, the ability to play a podcast. Now that we've identified building a feature isn't enough, we're going to have to keep applying this pattern if we want to get our app funded. Yikes, that's too many boxes. Let's reduce it down to a graph to make it easier to visualize. There, that's better. This is a minimum viable product, or MVP app. There's definitely an opportunity for us to continue growing our app from here. Here's a relatively mature app built by a small team, but certainly not an app like Facebook. In an app this size, how do you guess that data is shared between these nodes? What about sharing dependencies between these nodes? And how would you inject a database reference here? There's a word that begins with the letter S, but I'm not sure if I want to say it. It feels kind of dirty. Well, you're already thinking it, so I'll just say it. Singletons are the logical endpoint of an application that isn't designed around managing app state. Singletons aren't inherently bad, but with a singleton playing the role of state manager, you usually end up with duplicated state sprinkled around the code and others changing the state without your knowledge. They're also notoriously difficult to test, and that makes them a poor choice for being in the state management business. But what are the alternatives? The core idea of unidirectional data flow is relatively simple. Outside the source of truth, all state in the application should be considered read-only. I know what you're thinking. If the state is read-only, how do things get updated? Well, let's take a look. Consumers of state subscribe to be notified when the state is changed. In this diagram, the 3 view models will subscribe to be notified when the state changes. Perhaps the source of truth contains information such as which podcast episode is playing, the current timestamp, and whether the current episode is playing or paused. As the state changes, the view models receive updated state, and in turn, the various view controllers reflect the updated state. When the view controller needs to make a change to the state, first a request is made to change the source of truth. Then the source of truth accepts the request and makes the change. Finally, all interested parties are alerted of the change. This ensures that the different parts of the UI do not become out of sync. Now that you understand the core concept, let's look at the most common mistake I see when applying it. The most common mistake I see is people duplicating state outside the source of truth. What does that look like? Imagine, for example, if a view controller needed to mark a podcast episode as played. Perhaps a list of played podcast episodes is maintained on the server side and the request fails. The source of truth would reflect the episode as unplayed. Meanwhile, a view model might continue to reflect the played state because the state was duplicated outside the source of truth. Now one of our view controllers is displaying different state than our other view controllers. Notice how slight this change is. In the correct way, a request is sent, but nothing has changed until the source of truth sends the notification. In the buggy version, the change is made prior to the source of truth sending the notification. This defeats the purpose of unidirectional data flow and can be a cause of bugs. I want to be clear, I'm not recommending that you import a dependency the first thing after creating your project. In fact, you don't even need to import a dependency at all. Understanding this concept helps inform the way that we write code, and when done correctly, can eliminate a whole class of bugs from your code base. So stop herding cats and get back to writing features with unidirectional data flow. Thank you.